And so again, my point is, whether you're choosing to ever join or choosing not to join, you can get a pretty good gauge on your financial advisor by simply asking that question. Just ask. If I was to join an OSO or DSO or private equity backed company, what value would you put on the equity portion of this? And then the follow-up question is, so if I put $500,000, say, into the Thurston Fund, what value would you put on that equity there? And suddenly it has full value. And I'm just telling you, look at things a little differently, okay? Hello there, entrepreneurs, and welcome to another episode of your 5-Minute Friday. I'm your host, Dr. Glenn Krieger, and I recorded 2 episodes at the same time. They're going to be dropped at different times. I just don't know which one's going first. I'm hoping this is the one that's going to go second, but I wanted to have them be like sisters to one another, because the first one talks about your reason why with money and all that other stuff. This one's going to talk about private equity in general, because I want you to understand a couple of things. There's a big problem out there when people talk about selling their practices, particularly private equity or something like that, because financial advisors who are used to selling you stocks and bonds and maybe even alternative investments, whether it's crypto or investments in real estate or whatever it might be, they typically will tell somebody, and I've heard this literally dozens of times, if not hundreds, they will say, the numbers don't make sense to partner with a group because you have to assume that the private equity is zero, that it's going to go to zero. That's what they say. So once you pull the private equity component out of it, your investment in equity, yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But this is the big but. You should not treat private equity as if you're treating it a roulette table, right? You don't go up to a roulette table and go, I've got $1 million that I've built in my practice. Let me put it on 37, or even safer, I want to put it on red. That's not really what private equity is all about. Right? That's a true gamble. When you look at private equity, backed OSOs, DSOs, whatever you choose to go to, whether you're a dentist listening to this or an orthodontist or whoever you join, it's immaterial to me. I just want to try to set the record straight on something that's a big mistake out there. When they say it goes to zero, if my financial advisor ever said to me, I want you to assume the equity goes to zero, personally, me, it's not financial advice, it's just me, I would leave that financial advisor instantly. Because it means they don't understand the model of private equity. So you've heard me say this before, and these are the stats as of last year, as quoted to me by somebody who's a managing director of a private equity fund. A top 25% private equity fund, not a top 1% or top 5%, has an average return of 23 to 42% per year. Think about that. 23 to 42% per year for top 25%. Top 50% is still above anything you're going to get in an index fund. So these are not long shots by any stretch of the imagination. And with companies with margins like Ortho, we tend to do better than a lot of other companies that are out there. So think about this. You join an OSO or a DSO. The overall package is, let's just say you're going to get, let's just make it a simple round number. You're going to get $10 million, okay? Of the 10 million, 8 million is going to be cash, 2 million is going to be equity, right? That's a very simple number, 20/80, right? Simple number. And that's not uncommon in what I've seen. Now, the way that company handles your equity, very important. You've got to ask the questions up front. Are you equal payout at the same time as the C-suite people? What about when they pay off their leverage, all those? That's where it's very important to get into the details. But let's just assume that your equity is treated the way everybody else's is, like mine is, say, at Smile Doctors, right? So you know that that's not a conversation you need to worry about one way or the other, but there's other companies, I'm sure, that treat it that way. Knowing that the average company is 23 to 42% a year, it is in no way unreasonable to expect at least a 2x return over 5 years. I would be shooting typically for 2.5 to 3.5x for a mature company. You've heard me talk about the Thurston Fund out there. They did 3.3x in a little over 3 years on Fund 1. Fund 2 is probably on pace to do the same. This is the kind of stuff you're looking for. That was in 3 years, not 5. And if anybody ever wants to be connected with that company, I'm happy to make the introduction. I've done it for many of you, which has been a positive. I'm an investor myself, so I'm happy to introduce you to that. But my point that I'm getting at here is you have to do your due diligence. That's why I always say, talk to me. Let me DM with me. And like I said, 50% of the time I tell people, don't do it yet. It's too early in your life cycle, or your reasons are the wrong reasons. But the road is littered with companies that you could see it coming a mile away. I begged friends of mine not to join a specific group years ago, and it came back to bite them, right? You can see the warning signs a mile away. And, there's simple questions you can ask. I'm not going to get into it here to mitigate a lot of your concern. And I would tell you, having spoken to a lot of really, really smart people where we are with Smile Doctors, we should do great, right? And great is not 6 or 7x, right? Anybody who says to you, join our OSO or DSO and get 6 or 7x multiple, meaning if you have $2 million in 5 years, give or take, through lifespan, which I've talked about ad nauseum why it's 5 years. In 5 years, you'll get $12 to $14 million on your $2 million investment. Run, don't walk from that person. In today's day and age, that's an insane number to consider. And if you could get that, the risk you're going to have to offset it is going to be insanity. But if you said 2 to 3x, I can't find any broker or anybody knowledgeable who would say, Smile Doctors, 2 to 3x at some point, or a mature company, 2 to 3x. That sounds insane, right? There's no guarantees, but a company that's already done it twice, odds are, probably going to do it again. Pretty strong company, worth billions of dollars, right? So when your financial advisor says it's worth 0, how can they possibly do that, right? If you get something, it's gravy. No, the reason you join is you want cash up front, right? You want 6 to 8 years of after-tax dollars to be given you now so you can invest it appropriately and be way ahead of the game while still taking home a salary. But the equity is one of the big keys because it grows without you personally having to do anything. If the company does well and it's managed properly, you should see a good return on that money. So your $2 million should become $4 to $6, $7 million down the road. And if you stay in the company longer, you have the opportunity to do it again. So again, I just wanted to clear that up for people. There's no guarantees. I want to be crystal clear about that. But you can take Smile Doctors, who's already had 2 turns, and they've had really good returns on it, right? There is no other, as of the recording of this, no other American, United States-based OSO that's had an equity turn yet. They will. It's going to happen at some point. If you're even considering this, DM me. We'll talk about it. I said that in the last podcast. But just remember, if you're a financial advisor, ask your financial advisor, hey, if I was going to join an OSO, a good OSO, a solid OSO, something that's already had turns in the past, in calculating whether it's worth it or not, what would you count the equity as? And I'll bet you 90% of the time they're going to say, well, I would just hold that aside and count it as 0. Yeah, if you don't count the growing of equity, yeah, it's gonna fall behind. But equity is a real thing. If I said to you, you invested $2 million in Ford Motor Company, just a simple company you've all heard of, and I said, just count it as if it goes to 0, you look at me and go, what, are you out of your mind? Are you insane? Here, put $2 million into Google and just assume it goes to 0 for your portfolio. You'd say, you're bananas. Same thing. I look at it the same way. People in private equity look at it the same way. People who are financial advisors who understand private equity look at it the same way. That you're crazy if you just count it as going to 0. My financial advisor says it's not going to go to 0, but let's assume it maintains its value where you got it, right? Which also doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's very, very conservative because if it doesn't go to 0, how am I getting back what I put in, right? Like it doesn't make sense to me, but I get it. I understand it. At least the money's there. So if you have $2 million in equity, your portfolio is counting as if you have $2 million. Same way if you bought $2 million in Ford Motor, it would be as if you have $2 million in there until they crash and burn. But you wouldn't expect that. And so again, my point is whether you're choosing to ever join or choosing not to join, you can get a pretty good gauge on your financial advisor by simply asking that question. Just ask. If I was to join an OSO or DSO or private equity backed company, what value would you put on the equity portion of this? And then the follow-up question is, so if I put $500,000, say, into the Thurston Fund, what value would you put on that equity there? Now, all of a sudden, it's no longer an OSO. All of a sudden, well, typically they turn, their track record shows this. All of a sudden, it has equity value, right? And then if you said, well, what if I put $500,000 into, Google? What would you count for that in my portfolio? And suddenly it has full value. And I'm just telling you, look at things a little differently, okay? Because private equity has certain constraints, but certain benefits. And you just need to understand the game and learn about it. It's too much for me to get into here, but I've done a lot of podcasts on it. There's opportunity in that world outside the OSO and DSO world. And that's why I'm invested in private equity myself. It's different than venture capital, in which I'm invested as well. That's a totally different discussion, and I'm not going to get into it here. But if you have any questions about this stuff, reach out to me. And of course, if you go to Entrepreneur Summit, there's going to be a lot of people there who are both invested in private equity-backed companies and who've partnered with some form of private equity-backed OSO or DSO. So you'll be able to talk to them and ask them their opinion and to learn more about it. So I hope this has helped. Wishing you all a wonderful day. And go to opsummit2025.com. See if there are any tickets left as of the recording of this. It was selling really, really well. And again, I just don't know the answer. So Much love to each and every one of you, and DM me. I always love hearing from you. Take care.